I'm a wildlife photographer with a problem, and it's costing me a lot of shots. In fact, it's probably more than one problem. Have you ever noticed how bird photography can get, let's say, just a little bit cliched? You know those super sharp portraits with blurred backgrounds that we all love to take? Kind of the same ones we've been taking before, right? Or maybe now and then we throw in a new species just to liven things up, but it's kind of the same shot. And after all, we're probably not shooting for the next issue of Birds of Southern Africa. So why do they all have to look the same? My second problem is worse, because it's an even bigger cliche. I'm carrying around 2 cameras and 2 long lenses because my name is Will and I'm a videographer. And I know a lot of you are rolling your eyes right about now. Another dumb YouTuber, videographer, wasting our time. And yeah, you could be right about that. I mean, there's certainly a benefit to being a specialist. But video footage can make some good cash. You can sell it. And for the struggling wildlife photographer, that puts it squarely on the table. You've probably seen all the hype about hybrid cameras too, how everyone wants to flip into video with a switch. And yeah, that helps, but what about all the other crap we need for video? What about the crap we need for photography? How do we flip that over? And how do we flip it over in the middle of the action? Cut. Places, come on Simba, get back to your mark. You all know it doesn't work. So here I am, with my generic cut and paste shots, jerky footage, and my overheating R5, wondering if there's a solution. One thing you don't see a lot of wildlife photographers using is filter sets, and there's a pretty good reason for that. Most of the time they don't actually fit on the end of the lens. And if you use the drop-in filters, they're really expensive and they take too long to get in place. And they let dust in too. Not just ordinary dust, African dust, the kind of dust you'll be seeing inside that lens for the rest of your life. And if you somehow miss the memo on ISO, we like things to be bright. No losing 1.5 stops of light for a polarizer for us. It's even worse for video. Now we've got 6 stops of light loss. If you use a DSLR, you can't even see the animal in the viewfinder. But hang on, why would I even use a filter for photography in the first place? I think the most important one for wildlife photography is the circular polarizer. It's like Ray-Bans for your camera, and just like Tom Cruise, they're still cool. It cuts out the light that's been reflected towards you at specific angles, so it reduces glare off water, reflective surfaces, feathers and foliage, making color come through, and at the same time, it adds contrast. The problem is that it loses us a stop of light. And you know, wildlife photographers, we don't like losing light. So we have a situation where to get the best shot, we have to waste time screwing on a filter, and being lazy, we don't. So what about neutral density filters then? Only for video or landscapers, right? Well, no. These are for making those creative shots. The ones that won't be in Birds of Southern Africa. The ones that geniuses like Ernst Haas took with colour film for the first time. The ones that tell us something about ourselves as well as the subject. I always like to think of them as bringing in the 4th dimension, the dimension that photography tries so hard to defeat, the magical passage of time. And the benefit is the same for video. With video, we need to keep a fixed ISO for maximum dynamic range. We have to keep a fixed shutter speed to get natural movement in the shot. The only thing we have left to control exposure is aperture. And when we stop down, we get massive depth of field plus diffraction. The shot loses all the magic. There's one more filter that we need to talk about, the diffusion filter. Most often it's called a mist filter. Filmmakers love them because they bloom lights and soften reflections on digital cameras, and suddenly it looks as if you're remaking Hitchcock's Vertigo, which may or may not be to your taste. But they also reduce contrast. And why do we like that for photography? Well, there's a big difference between a digital photograph and one made with film. You may not be aware of it, but if you're a Lightroom user, your software already tries to apply highlight roll-off to every shot you take in an effort to emulate film. Mist filters are great for high contrast backlit scenes or any scene where you want to emphasize flare or atmosphere. The problem is, in wildlife photography, it's down to seconds to get the shot. If you're messing around with filters, it's gone. And these days, we need a photograph, the video, and possibly a creative frame or two, all from the same encounter. I hate the idea of gear that forces you to compromise on quality. And that's why I end up shooting 2 cameras. That costs me 2 sets of cards, 2 lenses, double the spare batteries, a bigger bag, harder travel, and double the insurance premiums. So, what if I could slip a filter on instead? Take photos and video at the same time, or use a neutral density for creative and panning shots. 1 camera, 1 lens, to rule them all. But I had to wait. I tried my ideas using screw-in filters. I also tried Lee filters, but gave up because they're so easy to damage. I even made a video about it, and that changed everything. I got an email out of the blue from a guy called Tony. Tony works at Freewell, a well-known filter brand, and he suggested I should just use their magnetic filters. And then he sent me some. The case is a functional square box that can slip into a jacket pocket, and the kit is made up of a screw-on magnetic base ring, a cap, and stackable magnetic filters. They're made from optical glass and a special coating to make them waterproof, dustproof, oil-proof, and scratch resistant, and they have a lifetime warranty. One of the best things about them is they come in sizes up to 112 millimeters. Almost nobody does that, and this makes them ideal for wildlife photography. You can use them on the Tamron and Sigma 150-600, the Canon 100-500, the Nikon 200-500, the Sony 200-600, the Fuji 150-600, the Olympus 150-400 TC, and even beasts like the Nikon Z 14-24mm. And that, my friends, is a hefty set of glass. So enough talk. Let's head out and see what they can do on animals. 𝗙𝗟𝗘𝗘𝗪𝗘𝗟 is a national park in northwest South Africa, around 3 hours from home. It's a tough drive down some dodgy pothole roads, and this time, when I got there, the campsites outside the park seemed to have been closed down. Given yesterday's events, I'm glad to be back in the park this morning. I had a nice sleep at the base camp, a campsite that I found about 2 kilometers from the gates, instead of the one that had been closed for strike action. And I'm here back inside the 𝗙𝗟𝗘𝗘𝗪𝗘𝗟, safe and sound, no car burnings, nobody stopping my entry. The sun is rising behind me, there's a beautiful carpet of blue-grey cloud over the green hills strung out along the road in front. And there's a day of wildlife photography ahead. This is a rufous-necked lark in its natural environment. And there are 4 things that I want to try and test out here. One is that the colours and contrast coming out of the circular polarizer are good. Second, I want to see a beautifully sharp and clear shot through the Freewell filters. Third, I'm hoping the polarizer will cancel out a lot of the glare on the feathers. And finally, I want to see that typical wing fluttering behaviour. I think that's going to be a perfect chance to test out a slow shutter speed and blur the wing. I think it's crucial to have creative options in wildlife encounters. Sometimes we head out knowing the kinds of shots we want and we go looking for them, but at others we don't. They come together in the moment, and sometimes we get it right, and a lot of the time we get it wrong. But those mistakes are the foundations of great images, the ones that work, the ones that you know in your gut are good. But it's panning shots where the NDs really shine. They're difficult to get from a vehicle that you're driving yourself because the animals need to run parallel to one of the open windows on either side. It's much easier in a guided safari vehicle without a windscreen in front because the animals being surprised often angle across the front and perform spectacular leaps in front of the vehicle. Just seeing an animal ready to move this way is half the battle. The other half is slowing the shutter down just the right amount for the distance. But with an ND, it's much shallower. You can pan slower, and you can even use a slightly higher shutter speed and still keep the background clean. The best thing is that these filters are so quick to put on that this kind of shot is a real possibility for me, especially with my Landy's secret weapon. My favourite thing about panning shots is that they're viable in the middle of the day. When the sun's high and the light's harsh, you can still take these shots and maximise your time spent in these distant and expensive locations. I'm really pleased with these filters. I think the clarity and colour coming out of them is great. I don't have any reservations putting them in front of my lens. I can stack the effects by stacking the filters. They're slim enough to fit inside a lens hood, and there's minimal vignetting, but that doesn't matter much for wildlife anyway. With additional rings, I can slap them onto any of my cameras as soon as I see an opportunity, and even more importantly, I can take them off. The infrared cut on the NDs looks good. Blacks appear black. The only downsides I've come across is that sometimes the cap comes free when the camera's bouncing inside the car. In the past, I haven't used a cap anyway. It takes too long. The filters themselves, though, are sticky. You need a bit of a nail to prise them apart. But you know what the best thing about them is? I'm excited to be heading out with my camera, thinking about new ways of making images of African wildlife. And that, my friends, is priceless. Tony from Freewell, thanks for the suggestion. You're awesome, buddy.